Buenos días, good morning con todos. Estamos aquí en La Voz de la Justicia. Good morning, everyone. We are very, very happy to be here with you one more Wednesday and to be here sharing about what DRCC is up to. Also, meeting a couple of new members that we have in the family for DRCC. And we are also sending our love to Maggie, who is resting at home, and but sending lots of love. Así que estamos muy felices de estar el día de hoy aquí acompañados con otro show de nuestra organización para dar algunas de las actualizaciones que tenemos y para tener contacto con las nuevas personal que tenemos aquí en la familia de la organización del DRCC. Y pues I just want to welcome Jamie this morning. Good morning. How are you? ¿Cómo estás, Jamie, this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm very happy to have you here this morning and to be sharing with amigos de Seattle. Estamos muy contentos de poder compartir con nuestra nueva persona aquí del personal. Y también tenemos a Christian Paulson, que nos está también ayudando ahora con alguna parte de las análisis de políticas en el barrio del Duwamish. Así es que welcome, Christian. You too. How are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. Well, we're going to have fun today, learn a little bit more about you both, and also update community with important things that we have been doing. So I'm going to start first with letting everyone know how wonderful it is to share this morning a new day, and we are standing on the Duwamish territories, and we are always thinking about how to better steward and how to better care for our Duwamish land and as a way of respecting and acknowledging our ancestors. Así que siempre me gusta dar la bienvenida aquí y recordándonos lo lindo que es tener la tierra con nosotros, de donde estamos pisando, que son la tribu nativa de los Duwamish, y pues damos la bienvenida a todas las personas que la cuidan, que la están mirando y trabajando por una comunidad saludable y así pues recordar a nuestros ancestros. So Jamie and Christian, welcome to DRCC too. You're two brand new staff members, and it's wonderful to have you here today already. So I would like to learn more about you so our community can hear more about your background and why you are interested in joining this DRCC family, and also how what is fun to you and in the day to day, because we're going to be interacting with community a lot, so it's always good that we relate to community in a way that as humans too, not only as the organizations that we represent. So I'm going to start with you, Jamie. Would you like to get started and tell us more a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Aiea, Hawaii. And then after 18 years, I moved to California and got my bachelor's in environmental science from UC Irvine. And then I worked as an outdoor and environmental educator in Seattle Public Schools. And I am just finishing up my law degree at Seattle University. And so I'll be taking the bar in July. And I'm very excited to be with DRCC.
Muchísimas gracias, Jamie. Entonces nos comenta pues que Jamie es proveniente de Hawái y ha estado allá estudiando sobre cosas ambientales, medioambientales y trayendo mucho conocimiento en las educación, en las escuelas, pero también Jamie está por graduarse de abogada en la Universidad de Seattle University, que es una universidad católica aquí en Seattle, y está por obtener su título de abogada, y pues estamos muy contentos de tenerla como parte de nuestro equipo, y también ella va a estar mirando todo lo que es el Superfund o el Superfondo aquí en nuestro programa de abogacía por un río más limpio. Así que welcome, Jamie, and love hearing more from you. Now let's go with Christian and hear a little more about our neighbor here too, and a little bit more about yourself. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Hello, I'm Christian Polson. I am born and raised in Seattle. I first came home from the hospital as a baby to South Park, and I still live there now with my two baby boys as well. Their names are Jules and Ridley. I um, I have spent most of my professional career as a cook and a chef and a restaurant consultant, working around the Puget Sound region. I've helped open several restaurants in Capitol Hill, like Ryan House, and I've worked at Bastille, which is now Bar Sabine, and several other fancy restaurants. And when I had my boys, I decided I needed to make a change, and I wanted to get a little bit more involved in the community on a different level. My values changed, and my life changed, and so I decided that I was going to go back to school. I actually dropped out of high school a long time ago, and so I went and got my GED, and then I went to community college and transferred from community college to Seattle University, where I just graduated magna cum laude with a degree in public affairs. I did my internship with the mayor of SeaTac, and I really learned a lot about how much I love policy and how it's implemented. And so um, at my time at Seattle University, I also completed a capstone that deals with leaded aviation fuel use at King County International Airport. And that's actually how I came to find the DRCC. I read their MOS study, which is really, really super helpful. And so I thought it was really cool to center that. And through that work, I've come to find you guys. I can't hear you.
Oh, there you go. Ok,
There.
thank you. Thank you, Christian. Así que
You're
estamos
welcome.
muy contentos de tener también a Christian con su experiencia. Él es un vecino de aquí del barrio, que ha vivido en South Park toda su vida, tiene 2 niños que están creciendo en la escuela de Concord también, asistiendo ahí, y con la experiencia que tiene Christian, sobre haber manejado un poco de los negocios, de los restaurantes, pero también él ha estudiado, un poco de las relaciones públicas en la Universidad de Seattle y viene con mucha, educación sobre lo que es, la parte de la contaminación del aire a través del MOS Study, y también ha sido involucrado en lo que tiene que ver con el Aeropuerto Internacional de King County, y nos da muchísimo gusto que pueda compartir un poco de esa experiencia con nosotros y tener, sus experiencias de los dos aquí. So, it's wonderful to hear from your background from you both, and I just like to, um, have a conversation among us, and just to start with community as we ground our work in environmental justice. So, I think it'd be important if we identify what does environmental justice mean to us, and to share with community a little bit more about that. Jamie, would you like to start?
Sure.
Entonces, he preguntado a Jamie, como estamos conversando, ¿qué significa la justicia ambiental para ti?
So to me, environmental justice is about making sure that people who are most impacted by things like climate change and other environmental issues are given decision making power and making sure that we're listening to their needs and their wants. And I was really interested in environmental justice growing up because I was fortunate enough to grow up around Native Hawaiian culture, and in Native Hawaiian culture, um, environmentalism is really inherent, and it's just a way of life. And so, growing up and seeing the way that these indigenous people were denied resources and discriminated against and had their land taken, it was really illuminating and really helped frame environmental work for me. And so, just yeah, really making sure that we're centering community and making sure that people who have to live with the consequences of environmental issues are at the forefront of these movements.
Thank you, Jamie. That was great. Para Jamie, obviamente que es como la justicia ambiental tiene que centrar en las comunidades que están impactadas por esta contaminación, por estas injusticias y también hacer un reconocimiento, por ejemplo, a nuestras comunidades nativas que han sido totalmente desregadas en todos estos años e ignoradas, y ha habido tanto abuso sobre nuestras tierras y sobre el reconocimiento de nuestros conocimientos ancestrales. Así es que para ella significa cómo vamos a hacer el trabajo de una manera importante solamente poniendo estas comunidades al frente. Christian, how about you?
Well, for me, environmental justice is extremely personal. I'm from South Park, and my children have lived most of their life in South Park or South Beacon Hill, and I think as many people in South Park are aware, that means that I might live maybe up to 13 years less than I would if I grew up in Ballard and lived with my children in Laurelhurst or Madison Park. Um, and that's true of all of my neighbors. My children play outside every day underneath the airplanes that fly over us. They go to parks that are likely contaminated with industrial waste and petroleum products. And they go to school blocks away from our house with hundreds of other children in the exact same situation that I see face to face every day. And that's what being a part of the South Park, Georgetown, Allentown, Beacon Hill sort of Boulevard Park area means for us. It means a different existence than it does for those living in different parts. And it's really, I think, as James Rasmussen said, is really about environmental injustice. And it has very real consequences on the lives of the people living here. And it goes on in one of the richest areas in the richest countries in the world. And it's just unacceptable to me.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Christian. That was very well said. Y lo que se refiere es como para él la justicia ambiental como un miembro de South Park que ha vivido aquí por sus hijos que viven y se desarrollan, ese sentimiento que tiene también de entendimiento de cómo está impactando la contaminación en sus propios hijos aquí, la diferencia de vida que significa vivir en South Park de puede ser hasta 13 años comparada con Laurelhurst o con Magnolia y cómo este trabajo es tan importante que él puede hacer los cambios y que él puede estar aquí, porque como somos vecinos y como estamos aquí con Georgetown, con Beacon Hill y con otros barrios como Allentown, compartiendo estas injusticias que tenemos, como dijo James Rasmussen, que no son las medioambientes, injusticias medioambientales que nos dan, ¿no? Las toxinas, la contaminación y todos los cambios sistemáticos que no hemos tenido para lograr una salud que nos merecemos. I thank you both for us answering that question as we center our work and as we base our work on environmental justice, advocating for community and putting them in the middle and the centered and in the front. It's extremely important, and that's why you both now have been doing already this work. In now it's specifically for Jamie, for example, that just started with the Superfund site, and Jamie, with your background. We ask you to do an analysis about what is happening, specifically referring to the environmental justice issues on the Superfund site that you did a short analysis. And I don't know if you want to share something about that our community can learn in few words. And then after Christian, I would also like to learn from you some of the analysis that you've been doing and great research with the King County International Airport, and what have been the things that we have learned there, as again we're centering community decision making and community voices, uplifting for if it's not something that I was doing a conference. I remember like last year, and a phrase that I came up with is, if it's about us, you can't move forward anything without us, you know. And so we have to constantly remind the government that they can't make any decision unless they are centering community voices. So, lo que he dicho un poquito es que Jamie va a compartir sobre un análisis que hizo del superfondo y de lo que se refiere a la justicia ambiental por sus antecedentes que tiene legales. Es muy importante que miremos esto desde su perspectiva. Y también a Cristian vamos a pedir escuchar el análisis que ha hecho y la investigación sobre unos asuntos que están ocurriendo para el Aeropuerto Internacional de King County. Entonces vamos a escuchar de los dos. Jamie.
So I looked at um, specifically looking at the East Waterway of the Duwamish River. And so the Superfund law, which is a federal law, requires the EPA to create a remediation plan for this part of the river. And DRCC is not satisfied with the remediation plan that the EPA has currently proposed. Essentially, it still allows for pollutions or pollutants at levels that threaten public health. And the three main concerns that we have with this remediation plan is the first being that the EPA didn't involve harmed communities. So this is really important because the EPA is required to meet with communities who are being impacted by these polluted areas and make sure that they're really having a voice in the cleanup plan and really thinking about what community needs are and have that come directly from impacted community members. And so the EPA did not do this when creating the plan for the East Waterway. And, DRCC really values community input, and that's one of the big things that, we fight for. And so not having this as part of the remediation plan was really unacceptable.
Excuse me,
The
Jamie. Luis. Okay, yeah. I was hearing an echo, but it's gone.
Okay. So the second thing that is not okay about the remediation plan is that it doesn't protect public health. Basically, the EPA was regulating pollutants, um, or they're choosing to regulate pollutants at a level that isn't going to be protecting public health. And this specifically relates to fishing communities in the South Park area, many of whom are um, API, Latinx, tribal communities, and they really rely on fishing for subsistence. And it's just a really important way that these community members are able to get food and also, connect to their culture and have space outdoors. And so, um, certain types of fish, like rockfish, the fish that are more bottom dwellers, um, they they basically could have PCB levels that are 270 times more than what is acceptable in the lower Duwamish Waterway site. And the lower Duwamish Waterway site is another area of the river that already has a remediation plan going for it. And PCBs are really dangerous chemicals that are super prevalent because of the way that they were mass produced. And they can cause cancer and other really serious health impacts. And so that's something that we really look out for. And, the EPA needs to really tighten the standards for PCBs because it has really, really horrible health impacts on community members. And then the final thing that we take issue with is the fact that not having a sufficient cleanup plan for the East Waterway is going to be impacting the lower Duwamish River because the whole river is one connected ecosystem. You can't just isolate certain parts of the river and say that one part is going to have these standards and the other part is going to have these standards because it all connects. It all kind of draws onto each other, and so in order to make sure that we're also protecting other parts of the river, like the lower Duwamish, we need to make sure that standards for the East Waterway are sufficient. And so the four main recommendations that DRCC has come up with are improving community engagement, so making sure that EPA is having meetings with community members and really listening to their concerns and incorporating that into their remediation plan. Creating an environmental justice analysis, which is required by the federal law CERCLA, and just making sure that, you know, the EPA is looking at the ways that fishing is um, a really cultural and, you know, just really important part of communities here and making sure that they're protecting that. The third is, like I mentioned earlier, making sure that the standards that are adopted for the East Waterway are consistent with the Lower Duwamish Waterway, because again, this is just one big river. We have to make sure all of the parts have sufficient cleanup standards. And then also making sure that the remediation goals comply with the Washington state law, the Model Toxics Control Act. And so those are sort of DRCC's for goals and recommendations moving forward.
And thank you. That was a wonderful summary, Jamie. And when we mean the RCC, of course, we always mean alongside with community, because that's our job to be bringing the voices of the community, and also reflecting what their thoughts and the you know, things that they are saying, that we can uplift it in the way that will make sense and health protection. And uh, you mentioned something that is really important about the fisher community, and we tend to forget sometimes that the Duwamish is still a river where we have a lot of fishers, and majority, as you said, are from the Vietnamese community, Khmer community, Latinx community. And so very, very important stakeholders in the river that need to be involved, and the EPA needs to consider them into any decisions that are being going to be impacted them directly. Um, Muchísimas gracias, Jamie, por ese gran resumen que hiciste sobre lo que está pasando en el río, y voy a referirme aquí rápidamente que después de 15 años, que fue 20 años ahora que fue declarado el río un río superfondo, que es la ley de la regulación que dice que nuestro Duwamish es uno de los ríos más contaminados y tóxicos en Estados Unidos. Es por eso que nosotros estamos ahora abogando para que la EPA, que es la Agencia de Protección Ambiental, haga lo que prometió en la parte del Duwamish, porque hay otra parte que es el East Waterway, que se llama, pero que está conectada, es el mismo cuerpo de agua. Entonces, nosotros lo que estamos diciendo es como que esos niveles se regulen a la misma altura que tiene de limpieza para el Duwamish, porque no queremos que impacten a los pescadores que están en el río pescando el salmón, y tal vez otras comunidades que quieren pescar otras cosas más, y asegurarnos de que los niveles de contaminación no van a impactar su salud de una manera de que sea tan dañina. También una de las quejas que tenemos es que la EPA no ha envuelto muchísimas personas todavía para tomar ninguna decisión. Entonces estamos pidiendo a la EPA que pueda envolver a la comunidad en todos los aspectos de la limpieza para que podamos nosotros tener una buena salud. Y más importante, para que se haga las cosas que ya se decidieron de una manera que respete las decisiones culturales y las decisiones participatorias de nuestra comunidad. Am, Así es que si quiere saber más, puede comunicarse con nosotros y vamos a poner información ahí. Pero I'm gonna now invite Christian to talk a little bit more about his involvement, mostly with air pollution, and his analysis that he's been doing with the airport, and the Moss study. Christian.
Hi, thank you. So yeah, like I think I mentioned earlier, through my capstone project at Seattle University, I found the subject of leaded aviation fuel through an unrelated podcast, and they mentioned it very quickly in passing, and it just kind of stuck in my head. I was like, wait, what do you mean leaded gas? So I decided to dig into that a little bit, and it turns out a lot of the activity that happens in the skies above my neighborhood is fueled by leaded aviation fuel. And so I decided to research that project, and that that project centered on answering three basic questions. Is King County International Airport a potential source of child lead poisoning in the neighborhoods of the Duwamish River Valley? What does it mean for children and families if they are being exposed to harmful levels of lead pollution? And what can be done to prevent any further potential, lead exposure around King County International Airport from a policy standpoint? And so it was a systematic research uh, or literature review. And I think it's really interesting to note that King County International Airport is a general aviation airport, which means it's mostly non-commercial, non-regulated, non-scheduled air traffic, and most of that air traffic at King County and most other general aviation airports is recreational. Um, Interestingly enough, all of that is fueled by leaded aviation fuel. Every gallon of leaded aviation fuel has 2 grams of lead in there. And I believe that a significant percentage of the thousands of children age 0 to 7 estimated to be living in the census tracts adjacent to King County International Airport are likely being exposed to airborne lead emissions from piston engine aircraft. Um, I believe that children living in the areas identified are at significant risk of permanent and irreversible damage with effects that cause societal harm beyond the individuals directly impact. And those include increased gun rates and domestic violence, reduced test scores and graduation rates, lowered IQs and economic production over their lifetime. And that can significantly affect their outcomes in life. Um, and I believe there's existing policies or expert policy recommendations that have been implemented or suggested that could mitigate or eliminate these harmful airborne lead emissions. Um, the last detailed EPA report for King County International Airport uh, indicated that they are responsible for nearly 800 pounds of airborne lead emissions per year. And studies of other general aviation airports around the United States in places like North Carolina, as well as Santa Clara, San Jose, they implemented blood lead level screenings of the children around those areas, and the results were alarming. Many of those tested um, had results that were at or exceeded the levels that were experienced or observed in the Flint water crisis of 2014. So it seems entirely plausible to think that that is also the case here in South Park. Like I said, every day I walk outside, I see these planes flying over our head, and all of it, or nearly all of it, is recreational or training people to fly recreationally. And so I just think that it's really important that we bring that information to the relevant, the parties involved. I think that that includes the FAA, the EPA, Washington State Department of Ecology, Washington State Public Health. And so, as well as the King County Council, who's directly responsible for operations at King County International Airport. And so that's really where my work has been centered in that regard, is trying to find a way to regulate or eliminate leaded aviation fuel. I hope I didn't go on too long.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, for all your work and research. That is a very important aspect that as we are addressing and what we call is all the cumulative impacts that we have in the Duwamish Valley, right? Here we are talking about the Superfund, we're talking about aviation fuels, we're talking about diesel particulate, we're talking about the lack of access to open spaces and how all these cumulatively impact this community. There is not even one day that we are resting in peace because there's always something else that has been coming towards us, and therefore the importance of the work that we do. Así es que estoy agradeciendo a Cristian por el trabajo que ha hecho con la parte de los aviones y todo lo que tiene que ver con la gasolina, los impactos de los aviones. Como saben, en Seattle aquí es un puerto muy importante y el aeropuerto es parte de aquí del puerto de Seattle, pero este es otro aeropuerto que tiene King County y que es el aeropuerto internacional. Pero sí sabemos que cuando estamos afuera vemos tantos aviones, un avión pasa cada 2.1 minutos sobre nuestra cabeza y obviamente que todos esos, lo que emiten, están también afectando nuestra salud. Y lo que ha estado haciendo en este particular asunto es cómo estamos abogando para que regulen mejor y tengamos mejor legislación que proteja a comunidades como el Duwamish Valley, que ya sufre de hecho de muchísimas otras cosas, que estamos al lado de los highways, que estamos al lado del aeropuerto, que estamos al lado del río contaminado y de las industrias que nos contaminan todos los días. Entonces, es importante decir que podemos nosotros como comunidad también aprender un poco más de lo que se está haciendo, pero también tomar acción y pedir al gobierno la regulación, que sería lo más importante que nosotros podamos existir para hacer cambios. So you both are doing amazing work already, and so important for our communities. Is there any take action that you would like to um, bring the community to? How can, if I'm a community member, or even if I'm not at the Wamish Valley community person, but I live in Seattle, what do you think is our responsibilities, or how can I take action and make a difference? Estoy preguntando a los dos que cómo podemos nosotros hacer la diferencia en estas cosas que hay tanto que hacer. Obviamente aprender es una, pero también tomar acción como personas que vivimos en Seattle o en el Duwamish Valley. ¿Qué es lo que podemos hacer? Anybody?
I mean, one thing I can think of off the top of my head is, when the EPA creates remediation plans, at least they're supposed to have comment periods. And so, one way to really make sure that you're voicing your concerns is to attend these meetings. And at these meetings, you can speak directly to EPA representatives and, let them know that they need to be protecting our community's public health. And, it's just important to make sure that the EPA knows that the community is informed about what is acceptable and what's not, and just showing up and making sure that, they know that we're informed and we're not okay with this.
Yeah, that's something tangible, and it's true, Jamie. Showing up for meetings, now that COVID, it's a little bit allowing us to being in person events, but it was extremely tough to do it during COVID times. And guess what? These changes were planned to happen when we were going through COVID. So this is another of the injustices that we were calling it out to EPA and the responsible parties, and why these decisions had to be made during times where people are struggling with so many other concerns, many being, unemployed, unhoused, or no food on the table. And then nobody had the real mind to be thinking about the cleanup levels, CPAHs, and all these things when you're concerned about the main thing. So it's really important what you're saying of learning, showing up, and also asking questions to your elected officials and keep them accountable. Entonces, una de las cosas tangibles que estamos hablando es que todos podemos aprender y venir a las juntas, traer la familia, hablar con la familia para que también nos involucremos y pedir al gobierno que sea responsable de las cosas que estamos haciendo, que estamos pidiendo, porque ellos últimamente nos tienen que servir a nosotros, a la comunidad. Ellos trabajan para nosotros, el gobierno. Nosotros no trabajamos para ellos. Así que hay que mantenerles bien de acuerdo con lo que la comunidad quiere ver, venir a las juntas, y nosotros somos los que debemos de decidir. How about you, Christian?
Well, for me, I think that it all kind of began with me becoming curious about my neighbors, my neighborhood, and my community. That was definitely like the first thing I started, was just asking people in the time of COVID if they were okay and if they needed anything. And I saw that my neighbors just spontaneously, with a group of other neighbors, started setting up like free outdoor food banks all around South Park for food distribution. And so I think a really great place to start is with our neighbors and just asking there. I think that moving forward, if you want to get involved in a more structured manner, you should probably go to www.drcc.org /I want to volunteer. It's all one word, all lowercase. And we can certainly find something for you to do as well. There's also these amazing boat tours that the DRCC is putting on right now. And just becoming educated about the issues will prompt discussion, which will prompt action. I just think sunlight is the best disinfectant when it comes to these sort of things. And what we're experiencing is environmental and racial injustice. And so I think just the more that we learn about this, and the more that we get the word out about our local organizations like KCIACC and others like Puget Soundkeepers Alliance, who are just doing incredible work in the area, and just getting connected with those kinds of groups.
Wonderful. That's so important to live in community. We make things happen united. It's much better and we are stronger, honestly. On point those recommendations. And Christian, thank you. Lo que recomienda Christian es qué importante es conocer al vecino, es empezar a crear esta solidaridad y educación, familiaridad con quien vive al lado, aprender juntos, también un poco de curiosidad que nos va a hacer tener los cambios que necesitamos ver. Tenemos también nuestra website que es www.drcc.org y ahí tenemos oportunidades para ser voluntarios. También tenemos paseos en bote. Este sábado tenemos un paseo y tenemos todavía disponibilidad para invitar a la comunidad si quieres conectarte con el río, conectarte con vecinos, con la comunidad, pues avísanos y puedes escribirnos aquí en nuestra website o just contáctanos directamente. Así es que, well, I'm very thankful for you both for joining us this morning, for introducing yourselves. We are very, very proud for making part of the being part of the team now and be with us, and I'm sure community is going to be seeing lots of you out there, but I just want to make sure that you are here and this morning with our listeners. They get to see you, know a little more about you, and looking forward to continue the work. So any last words that you would like to say?
Just thank you again for having us, and I'm I know I'm probably speaking for Christian, but we're both so excited to be a part of the team and get to work with the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm just very overwhelmingly grateful and humbled by the opportunity. I feel like I'm in my right place, and that this is an amazing opportunity to impact the world in a positive way, which has been my goal since I started school. So I'm overjoyed.
Están los dos muy contentos de ser parte de la familia y para poder hacer cambios en la comunidad y en el mundo. Muchísimas gracias, amigos de Seattle. Luis, gracias. Thank you so much to all the people listening, and I hope that we can be connected. And we will be in touch. Until next week, we will be bring more important information related to the work that we do. Muchísimas gracias, Luis.
Thank you.